We are live. We are live. Last time I talked to you guys, Penn State had just lost the Orange Bowl to Notre Dame, and here we are. 2 weeks later? A lot has happened. Nick Singleton comes back. Katron Allen comes back. Drew Aller confirms he's coming back. Denai Sun comes back. St. Durant comes back, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't want to say the biggest get of them all. Obviously, want this players back, but Penn State hires Jim Knowles away from Ohio State. First and foremost, let's give a massive, massive thank you to Tom Allen and his daughters. His daughters living in South Carolina has him going to Clemson instead of staying at Penn State because, I mean, from all reports, Penn State was like happy with Tom Allen. Clearly, they were not $3.1 million happy with Tom Allen, but they were happy to keep Tom Allen, want him to stay around. He wanted to go to South Carolina to be with his family. All good for him if that's what he wants to do. And it just opens up this path for Penn State to somehow get Jim Knowles. Jim Knowles and Penn State have been connected in the past. When he was at Oklahoma State and he originally went to Ohio State, he was a target of James Franklin's. He opted for the Buckeyes, obviously. Penn State was able to get Manny Diaz, who was very good for Penn State. But, man, to get a guy that James Franklin has wanted for a couple of years now, and I wrote about all this on blacksheardiaries.com, so make sure that you are reading our stuff on blacksheardiaries.com. But this is as big of a statement hire as you can make. I don't even know if there's really anything all that comparable. You'll see sometimes like Ohio State lost a running back coach to Michigan last year. You'll see, wide receiver coaches or tight end coaches go from one SEC school to another. But it is not very often that you see an offense coordinator or defense coordinator at the national champion go to, there's no divisions anymore. Let's call it a division rival. For Penn State, for James Franklin to go and take the reigning champions defensive coordinator, Ohio State's defensive coordinator, the program that has been James Franklin's boogeyman for, a decade. Everybody talked about Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State having problems against them. It's really Ohio State. Yes, Michigan has had, a nice run those 3 years from 2021 to 2023 when Penn State was playing them. But before that, it was kind of back and forth. It's always been Ohio State being the boogeyman. So for Penn State to go and take Jim Knowles, who is making, I believe is reported $2.2 million. The highest paid defense coordinator in the country is Blake Baker at LSU, making $2.5 million. For James Franklin and Pat Kraft and Neely Bendapudi and all of Penn State's administration to empower James Franklin and Pat Kraft to be able to make this move where you go to Ohio State, you tell Jim Knowles, what is your price? And you're able to execute that, give him a reported, $3.1 million to come and be the defense coordinator at Penn State. It's as big of a hire as you can make. There's not many other hires in the college game that have that is this much of a statement of where Penn State is at this point. I've always, kind of laughed at the notion that Penn State is like, if you read online, some Penn State fans act like Penn State is like little sisters of the poor, like, oh, we're a middle class, mid-tier Big Ten program. We don't have a lot of money. I obviously don't think that was true, but there was a difference between Penn State and Ohio State, or Penn State and Georgia, or Penn State and Texas, right? Those super elite programs. So to take a defense coordinator from one of those programs as they are literally celebrating their championship today. They're celebrating their championship today, and Penn State, I want to say rains in their parade because credit to Ohio State, and I'm sure, I would certainly be happy if Penn State won a title and then some of the coaches left. But man, what a get for Penn State. Like I was saying before, it just sets everything up for 2025 as I was talking about when this all started, that you get, all these players back, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Drew Aller, the guys on defense, Denai Sun, St. Durant, Key Wheatley, we can keep going on and on. And to bring in a guy like Jim Knowles, who literally has a championship pedigree, as we just saw, came into Ohio State. I think it's easy to look at Ohio State and say, anyone could have won with that defense. And I think there's some truth. That was like one of the things I've talked about with Tom Allen, where it's like, when you have Abdul Carter and Denai Diaz on at defensive end, it's kind of hard to have a bad defense. But Jim Knowles deserves a lot of credit. Yes, they were, supremely talented. We talked about the $20 million roster and whatever. When Jim Knowles got to Ohio State, they were not a good defense at all. They had just fired Kerry Coombs, who did not do a good job. Just look at the numbers here. Ohio State was number 43 in the country in yards per play allowed and number 38 in points per game allowed the year before Knowles got there. It was a slow build. That 2022 season, the first one under Knowles, wasn't uh, fantastic. It was better than it was under Coombs. But these last 2 years, Knowles shows that if you have the talent, that he can win. And as crazy as it sounds, Penn 25 is in a better position defensively, at least defensively. There's some question marks offensively, namely wide receiver, as Jared points out here. Throw some money at wide receiver. We'll talk about that here in a second. But Penn State defensively is in a really, really good spot where you're returning, 6, 7 starters. Depends if you want to consider Zion Tracy a starter. He was kind of like, their nickel corner, lying guy. But you have Zane Durant at defensive tackle. You have Denai Deson, 2 linebackers, Tony Rojas, Dom DeLuca. You get A.J. Harris back, I think arguably the best corner in the Big Ten. Zakee Wheatley was really coming into his own at safety. There are a lot of really good pieces defensively for what Jim Knowles is coming into. And he's coming into a defense that was very good. Of course, yes, losing a guy like Abdul Carter, losing a linebacker like Kobe King hurts, but this was a top 10 unit, both in points per game allowed and in yards per play allowed, which I think are 2 of the better stats when it's, looking at how good a defense is. So that jump from very good or top 10 to literally the best defense in the country, which is what Ohio State was by both of those metrics. But you can't ask for much more if you're Penn State. So just really, really, really impressive stuff by Penn State to get this. It's crazy. I feel like this defense coordinator search went on for a month when it was 2 weeks ago. I'm trying to think when Allen actually finally left, but I think it was about 2 weeks. I think it was Monday the 13th because it was when Singleton and all those guys were announcing that they were coming back. So crazy times. There were a lot of different names that popped up at times. I think we all thought at one point certainly seemed like Dan Lynn was the main target. So shout out to I would have been very happy with Dan Lynn, but shout out to Dan Lynn for turning us down, because to pivot from Dan Lynn to go and get Jim Knowles is just great stuff. Because when you look at the Jim Knowles side of things, the fact that he is a great defensive coordinator is the most important part. But to hurt Ohio State in the process, and when you look at Andy Kotelnicki, what he did at Kansas when he would play Oklahoma State, which had Jim Knowles, you look at what Andy Kotelnicki did against Jim Knowles this year, the same way that Penn State's bugaboo has been Ohio State, Jim Knowles has been one of the few guys that has been able to figure out Andy Kotelnicki's offenses. So one, very good that Andy Kotelnicki will not have to play in an actual game Jim Knowles this year. And secondly, it's great that he's now on staff. That I'm sure that those two are going to have so many conversations in the spring, in the summer as they're prepping for stuff, and Knowles can kind of point out to Andy, here's where your offense shows. Here's where we attack and why we were able to have a lot of success. And a lot of that success is Ohio State's supreme talent. That's a big part of it. But certainly, even going back to their days at Oklahoma State and Kansas, Knowles clearly kind of just had a read on Kotelnicki's offenses. So that is certainly a very good thing. So shout out Ollie Pub, by the way. No free ads, but Ollie Pub's so very good. Man, I think we got Tim here. Got back for a run and got the news alert on my watch. Yeah, I was certainly hoping that this was going to come today. I did not want to have to go into the workday tomorrow, wondering if this was going to happen or not. But the championship parade for Ohio State at noon, it certainly wasn't going to happen this morning. I was hoping that it would be able to happen today. So, kind of big picture wise, as we said, it's as big a hire as you can make. There's not many times that a program like Ohio State or Georgia or Texas or Oregon, kind of what I look at as like those elite programs in the country lose a defensive coordinator for a lateral move. I mean, Penn State just lost Tom Allen for a lateral move, but so just I know I'm repeating myself, but just massive for the program. When you go back and you think of James Franklin after losing to Ohio State in 2018, he called the shot that the great to elite stuff, which I know has become kind of like a joke in Happy Valley, especially nationally, to kind of poke fun at James Franklin. But it has been a long road, and it's not over yet, right? You have to actually prove it on the field. You need to lead on to results, but This is the type of move. This is the big boy, the big statement, the big splash hire, and it is the great to elite move that Penn State has needed. Talked about these guys that are coming back in 2025. You now have Jim Knowles. You certainly need to get a wide receiver, as once again, I'm going to bring up Jared's comment here. Certainly need to get another wide receiver. There's going to be the spring transfer portal period. I believe it's open for about 10 days at some point in late April. So that is going to be very big and very important for Penn State. I know Ohio State fans apparently don't think that Ohio State does not tamper with players. I won't say that Penn State tampers with players either, but you can be sure that I think Penn State will be ready for whatever happens at wide receiver in that spring transfer portal period, because that is kind of the question mark on Penn State at this point. We've seen these way too early 2025 projections. Penn State in that very much in that top 5 conversation. I think they kind of the average is probably number 3 or number 4. You see some number 1s as well. I know Platt had them number 1. I know Stu Mandel had them number 1. I am a little uneasy about them being number 1 when you lose Tyler Warren, and I like the tight end room, but Tyler Warren is a big piece to miss, and you don't really have those guys at wide receiver. Cameron Hudson was a solid get. Devontae Ross was a solid get, but I think there still needs to be a little bit more proven at wide receiver or just pass catchers in general to really feel good about number 1. So we'll see what happens in the spring transfer period, because if you can get a guy that I don't want to say an absolute number 1 wide receiver, but someone who can have 60 plus receptions and touchdowns and that type of thing, then Penn State really does not have a lot of holes. Whatever your thoughts on Drew Allure, I think he's one of the better quarterbacks in the country, and is only going to get better. Not even 21 yet. He turns 21 in March or April. You have those guys at running back. You have maybe the best offensive line I think at Penn State will be next season, both in the starters and also the depth and the experience and everything like that. And now defensively, you return, like I was saying, a good group of guys, and to get maybe the best defense coordinator in the sport. Once again, it's just a sign of what Penn State, James Franklin, and Pat Kraft, what they know Penn State can be in 2025. This is as all in a move as you can get. Not to say that 2025 is like necessarily the end all be all, but you don't return the guys in the 2022 class, Allen, Allen, etc., and can let that opportunity slip by. The same way that Michigan returned so many dudes in 2023, the same way Ohio State returned so many guys this past season. Jack Slater's, the Mecca Lucas, the JTTs, Cody Simon, that linebacker. You have to take advantage of that. And it certainly seems like Penn State is aware of the opportunity they have, and to go out and hire Knowles is fantastic stuff. Fantastic stuff. What a couple of days it has been. Literally, 6 days watching Jim Knowles State win the national title. Just 2 hours ago, we were watching Ryan Day celebrate the national title, and Penn State goes and they take Jim Knowles right from home. Beautiful stuff. Yeah, I think that's really all I got. I just wanted to jump on here and just kind of discuss that hire and where Penn State is headed. I can only speak for myself as far as where I was last offseason and where I am this season, and like my mindset of where Penn State is at. I really love that 2023 team. I was extremely disappointed in basically how poopy stinky the offense looked. And heading into 2024, I certainly thought that Penn State would be really good, but I can confidently say it was probably I was excited for the season. I just want to make that clear, but it was probably the least excited I've been about a Penn State season, just because I felt like that we were kind of stuck in the mud, that we had plateaued, that it would just be turn into season, and Penn State would kind of dwindle out the same way they always did. I don't know if this past season was like totally different than 2022, 2023, in the sense that there was no Michigan on the schedule. Penn State basically just beat the same teams they beat, and SMU and Boise, they are what they are. But for Penn State to get to that college semifinal, to get all these guys back, and now to hire Jim Knowles, I think that there's going to be a ton of hype around this Penn State team going into the offseason. So it's been a very, very long time for the Penn State team to have this level of hype. I know going into 2017, there were a lot of people that thought Penn State was, top 5-ish. 2023, same thing. I think they started the year like number 6 or number 7. So I think this one might trump it all, just based on what they have coming back and making a move like this where you put everything on the table and you go you get Jim Knowles and you pay him over $3 million and make him the highest paid assistant in the country. So yeah, just great stuff. Also, finally, just shout out Clemson fans who acted like Penn State didn't have money to keep Tom Allen. That's why he left, because Tom Allen's only making like 1.3 million at Penn State or something. So I would be curious to see Tom Allen's reaction to this. I don't know, the whole daughter thing in South Carolina, but I wonder if it's kind of like, hold on, wait, they're paying over $3 million. Are you sure? James, hold on, wait a second. Sorry, Don. We got Jim Knowles. We got Jim Knowles. All right, I'm logging off. I got my Eagles stuff on. Eagles game comes on in 10 minutes. I'm going to pop on here and get my takes on what is going to be a fun, exciting offseason with all our guys back. And Ryan Day, I'm sorry, but we took your defensive coordinator too. So big moves from James Franklin and Pat Kraft. Thanks everyone for watching. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Make sure you like this video as well. That really helps. We have tons of videos this offseason. We're going to do, all the normal stuff. We'll talk about, the team in the spring and previews and whatnot. But we're also going to do some other different stuff as well. As far as we're going to start doing some Penn State trivia every once in a while. We're going to do, a Penn State rewatchable series where we go back and watch previous Penn State games and kind of, talk about it, put it into context, stuff like that. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel because we will be busy this offseason. It's a great time to be a Penn State fan. So see you guys.